Welcome to Kung Fu Conversations and our second interview with the Kung Fu guy, Neil Ripski of Red Jade Martial Arts out of Canada. Welcome this morning, Neil.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, Neil, let's, since I said this to Rosamay, I think I'm going to keep this. Would you tell us your Kryptonian Kung Fu origin story, my friend?
Well, I grew up in a small planet close to Earth. Pretty close anyway. It's called Canada. It's very odd. I was born in the 70s, so I'm old. And when I was very young, I had a bit of a strange kind of growing up, if you will. I actually ended up with, well, let's really talk about stuff. I had a brother that passed away when I was 4 years old. And what that did is it affected my parents pretty heavily. So there was sort of a disconnect, let's say, in our family, right? They were hurting. They were young and 20. I was a little kid, didn't know what was going on. So what ended up happening was when I was getting older, I started getting bullied. I had like big ears. My head was too big and I had a pot belly. So when I was getting picked on, it was not exactly the internet back then. So it was, violence. I would get beat up. I would get picked on, come home with black eyes, things like that. And my parents generally they were very Christian, still are. And turn the other cheek was always what I was taught. So basically it turned into get your ass kicked and don't get in trouble at school. Well, that didn't really work for very long because eventually you get beat up too many times. And I got really lucky. I was doing my paper route and took my quarters down to the local arcade. And there was a sign on the arcade door saying, learn self-defense with the art of Kung Fu. And I was like, I am the guy who needs that. So paper route, money in hand, right? I took two of my best friends because I was freaked out, didn't know what I was doing. And the three of us went down and we tried Kung Fu class. And, we went in there and we stood in lines and we sweated and it was crazy, right? We're kicking and punching and never done anything. We're all like 10 years old. And I remember taking a break to go get water after the workout. And I turned to my friend at the time who was with me. And I was like, I'm going to wear that sash one day. I'm going to be a teacher of this. And I pointed at my teacher, I remember, and saying like, I'm not just going to be like a black sash. I'm going to get that one. He's going to give me his. And, Bert was like, yeah, sure you are. And dude, I glommed onto martial arts as my foundation where my family could not be. So my Shurfu, my teacher, father, mentor really became that for me. So what ended up happening in my life was the bullying started to go away. And not because I was kicking people's asses, but because I was changing, right? I was getting bigger, stronger, more confident. I wasn't afraid of people anymore. And then you're not a victim, right? People stop picking on you like you're a victim. So about, how old was I? I don't know. I was in my late teens anyway. I'd been training for a few years and, things weren't going well at home. Like I said, my parents and I had some trouble. And so, yeah, I'm just going to tell you guys stuff. I ended up, cool, man. So basically what ended up happening was I was not happy. I was a pretty depressed kid. And I found that there was this one place that I was happy, which was practicing. And I don't know what the right word would be to use, but basically if math class sucked, training was better. If gym class sucked, training was better. Physics class, I do physics all day when I'm training. And
yes.
Yeah, I ended up quitting school to go practice. Like I would just skip class until there just wasn't any more classes. I'd go to school in the morning, have coffee with my friends in the cafeteria, and they'd all be like, yeah, I got to go to math class. I'm like, got to go punch trees. And that was how I ended up leaving high school. So I actually never graduated because I just started changing my life into that. When my first teacher, how much of this do you really want to know?
Go ahead.
Seriously.
Sure,
how much time do we have?
Go ahead. About 3 hours. Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, never mind.
You don't have to use all the
I'm so worried then. So what happened origin story wise, no. Yeah. Okay, fine. So I catch my first teacher sleeping with my girlfriend. 17 years old. Yeah. And that didn't go well at all. And so I had this kind of mentor father figure that I had kind of replaced my family with in my life. And then this person, betrayed me. So I was really pissed. And he and I had a little argument, and we ended up kind of parting ways. This is years ago now. So anyway, I'm single, of course, and without a teacher. Luckily, I had a Kung Fu brother, actually a guy that I grew up with, Lauren, who he was actually in Taekwondo when I was in Kung Fu. But we ended up sort of doing the same thing, was if I was out training and he had a spare, he'd come fight me and then go back to school for the day. We're actually still friends like 30 years later. But Lauren and I ended up training. We moved in together and started training a lot. We had an agreement at the time that we would train 5 hours every day and drink 3 liters of water. I can't remember. We had some kind of contract we signed for some reason. And then I got really lucky. About a year passed, and when I was in the city near here, Edmonton, Alberta, I went to the movies one night, and I had just missed a Kung Fu demonstration. There was a demo with the movie. I can't remember what movie it was. Probably like Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. One of those. And I missed this Kung Fu demo, and there was these like little pamphlets left over, right? At the movie theater. And the pamphlet said, come on down, try this Chinese Kung Fu, blah, blah, blah. And we'll give you some free classes. I think it was 2 weeks of free classes to try it out. And I'm like, even if this guy stinks, it's 2 weeks of free classes, right? 2 weeks of Kung Fu, man. I'm doing that. So I went down there and, if I really tell you this story, the Shaolin monks were in town. The very first time they ever went on tour, right? They come to Edmonton, and because Master Ma, who I was about to meet, he was in with the Chinese community, so he got to meet them and stuff, and he had tickets and everything else. And me and Lauren and our friend Ray, we all ended up buying tickets and going because, like, Kung Fu guys were like, 18 years old. We got to see the Shaolin monks kicking ass. So it was awesome. I was shocked because I was like, I thought I did Kung Fu, and then whatever they're doing is very different. And Lauren and Ray and I were all just like in awe of these guys. And I remember the one part of the demo, how the monks let you come up and break sticks over them or whatever. Well, who wants to come punch a Shaolin monk? Oh, baby, pick me. I want to punch a Shaolin monk. Holy crap. So Lauren and Ray and I get picked, right? Perfect. The three of us get picked, and we get to go up and do the one where, where all the guys are holding the log and they're smacking it into this monk's stomach, and you're knocking them around and all that stuff. And then the guy who is in New York, Shi Yanming.
Yep.
Right? Because he was there because it was before he defected, right? So he's doing Iron Body. And we're up on stage, and they're like, yeah, hit him. Let's hit this guy. So I can say I have punched Shi Yanming. And it felt a lot like punching a wall, which was exactly what it should have been. It was amazing, man. Like, scarred my knuckles on him. You know what I mean? Like, it was worse than a heavy bag hitting him. And he wasn't even wearing, like, a top. It was kind of gross. I hit him once and twice. Thought to myself, I've dropped everybody I've ever hit like that. So then I just hit him about as hard and as fast as I could until they pulled me off. And he just stood there, which was awesome. Well, anyway, so now I got this movie pamphlet, right? So I whip down to this address, and I find this god-awful cave of a underground kung fu school. And there's a bar at street level down in this shitty part of Edmonton. And underneath and behind the bar, there's this door with a set of bars over it, right? And it just says Kung Fu on it. And that's it. Come on down the stairs into this cage and see what happens to you. Okay. So whip down there, and I kid you not, man, there's a guy sleeping on the couch, like sleeping, like asleep. You walk into the Kung Fu school, dude's sleeping. Nobody's there. There's just this guy sleeping on the couch. And I'm like, hi, am I in the right place? And turns out it's Dicey Hing. He's like, oh yeah, I just came early, man. No worries. Steve will be here soon. And this is so not what I was expecting. My first teacher was Jing Wu. So it's like, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full. And so Master Ma shows up, and he comes in, typical him. He's, I don't know, what was he, like buck 30, soaking wet, smoking a cigarette in his hand, putting it out as he walks in the door. That guy. And so we talk, and he looks at me, and you were at the Shaolin monks, weren't you? I'm like, oh no, this dude saw me punching that guy and like doing nothing. That sucks. Well, what can you do? But anyway, so he was like, yeah, I can totally help you. And we talked and started class that night. And it was really great. That was actually the first time I ever saw Drunken, was that night. My Kung Fu brother, Troy, was practicing Drunken. So he was working on it at the time. So I got to see what I saw at the Shaolin monks done at Master Ma's club.
That's
so
awesome.
Now I'm in love, right? I'm like, oh man, that's killer. So he had me hooked. And then, I mean, the training started, like he was just brutal. Like he was everything I needed him to be in a way. You know what I mean? I wanted to know that I was doing the real thing. And I know all the Kung Fu movies I watched look like the real thing's hard. So, a few push-ups and jumping jacks and stuff, the Jing Wu was hard, I thought. But like the stuff, like the things that Ma would come up with that were definitely against the Geneva Convention were hard, like hard things, but, and things that didn't make any sense at the time, they do now, but at the time, man, we would be made to do all sorts of, I'm trying to think of a couple weird exercises for you. We used to have to do, this is terrible. Stand in handstand, feet up against the wall. Okay. Ball on your feet, like a little volleyball or whatever. Yeah. Okay. And walk around the room. And every time you drop the ball, it's going to be push-ups. Right. Yeah. That was fun. That was during, Qingming Festival. We were always made to do that one. Cause I don't know why, but that's what happened. That was one of them. But there was lots of terrible ones. Yeah. Lots of different power exercises, having people sit on you while you're trying to do push-ups and all sorts of crap. But I ended up training with Master Ma, and very quickly, I mean, I'd already kind of shut down the rest of my life, right? I had quit school. I wasn't working. I was a sifu from the Jingwu, and I'm living with my girlfriend, and I start training with Ma, and I'm like, I come into class maybe a month or two later, and I'm like, I can't afford to do this. Things aren't going well. I'm not working. I'm going to like lose my apartment. So what ended up happening was my girlfriend and I broke up, and Ma said, you teach my kids classes. You can stay at my house. So even though at the time I felt really crappy because I was the homeless guy getting a hand up, I didn't realize I was kind of winning the lottery. Because Ma was like, what did we have? We had 3 classes a day, 5 days a week. Yeah. And then there were kids classes, maybe 3 times a week that I would teach. So I attended every class. That was all I did. Right. So it was like, you go to class 3-4 times in a day and try to survive and heal up overnight and then do it again. And then he started doing privates with me in the afternoons once I discipled, which was really nice. That's how I got most of the stuff, really. Sure. Was then once we were at home and he trusted me, then he just started laying things on me, which was good. But yeah, so I was with Ma for a few years. I lived with him. About 4 years, something like that. And then, because I'm telling you my actual story, not just the condensed version, Master Ma opens up a second school. Here's the plan. We're going to have a school that's just for us cool kids. And then we're going to have a school for the public. And we're going to find the cool kids, and then we'll bring them to our school. This is the plan, right? So we're super secret now. We're extra secret, underground, and cool. So we start this other club. One of my brothers is teaching it because I'm the youngest brother, right? My brother Ed's teaching. So I've got a set of keys. I go down there and I help Ed once in a while and spar with his guys and do the thing. Well, Sifu gets the idea finally that I've discipled. He's like, you should take on a student and like teach him. He'll be your student, but I'll help you. Okay. Right. So me and this one guy, Mike, we get to be good friends, and okay, man, you're my experiment, if you will. So he and I start training an extra day a week. Mike and I were doing Friday nights. And we went down to Ed's place because I had keys. And it was dead on Friday night. Who trains Kung Fu on a Friday night? Nobody, right? So we would go down there for an hour and then we'd whip across the street to the bar and have a beer and talk about it. Well, this one Friday night we whipped down there and I open up the door and my teacher's cheating on his wife. And Neil's had this problem before. So that didn't go well at all. So I just closed the door and left and I told Mike. And I'm like, Mike, you're not going to like this. He's like, what? Well, Shifu's in there and he's sleeping with not his wife. He's like, really? Are you kidding me? Well, it was Mike's girlfriend. Jeez. Yeah. So Mike and I tried to make him a deal. I was in the middle of learning something. Okay. I was right near the end of the system. And I was like 3/4 through this thing I was doing. And I was like, Mike, can you give me like a week? Like, could you wait a week before you talk to him? Because I'll have it in a week. I know I will. And he did pretty good. He made it 3 days, right? I can't blame him. And then there was a big explosion at the school. And my Kung Fu brother, Dominic, he actually called a meeting to talk about it. And so what ended up happening was a group of us ended up having a talk with Shifu and just saying that, we're just not going to be around anymore because of this, as I gently, gloss over what was said. But anyway, yeah, karma caught up with Shifu not very much longer afterwards. About 10 or 12 weeks later, he was killed in a car accident.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
So that was pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening was I got a hold of my oldest brother, Shug. And Shug had been with Master Ma for I believe he started the same year I started martial arts, like in the 80s. He had started with Ma. Like, he'd been there forever, right? Which was super weird because Shug's this little bit older than me, super tall, kind of gangly, weird looking guy with a stupid beard. I hope he listens to this. Really bad beard. Anyway. And what was strange is Master Ma had a rank system in class for the public people, right? So we all had sashes and stuff, rank tests, all that crap. And the ranks went, there was 3 ranks of green, 3 of blue, 3 of orange, 4 of black, and then white. That was the whole thing. So I joined, and in this 3.5 years I was living with him, I got my black sash, and I was starting to go up into the higher ranks of that. And Shug was a blue sash when I joined. And Shug was a blue sash when he quit, too. And I thought, what's going on, man? Because every time I fought Shug, he beat me to a pulp. It wasn't even close. It was so... I remember being actually angry at him in class and being like, at least do some kung fu to me, for God's sakes. Don't just slap me around like my kid. But then afterwards, what I ended up finding out is after Sifu's car accident, I went to talk to Shug because he'd been there forever, right? And I wanted to make sure that the system was safe. Because, if I don't have it all, he does. There's no way he hasn't seen it, at least. So what I ended up doing was I ended up chatting with Shug, and he was told to wear his blue sash in class, but he had actually been finished for a little while. Neither of us really know why he wasn't supposed to wear his rank. I don't think he was ever even told, but he was supposed to keep things kind of secret, I guess. But he was a disciple too. And when I was discipled, there were things I was told not to tell people, the whole Chinese thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, luckily, Shug and I got together and between the two of us, we had the whole system because there was a couple of little pieces I hadn't gotten that he had, right? Mm-hmm. And vice versa. So we stuck together and we trained for a couple of years while I opened my school, and he would actually come down and train with me. And then I met Sifu Chen. You want my whole story, right?
Yeah. Go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. So this is the highlights anyway. So then I met Sifu Chen Qiming. He's the master who just passed away just a little over 50 days ago.
He was your Lohan teacher, Neil?
Yes, that's right. He taught me Shaolin Lohan Pa. So my first teacher was Jing Wu, so like Kung Fu stuff, basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then Master Ma was what you would call folk Shaolin. So it's Shaolin Kung Fu, but it's not like what the temple guys do, right? It's the smattering of, our families lived near the temple for a really long time. You know, I know a little of this and a little of that, and yeah. So then I meet Sifu Chen though. And Sifu Chen's my Yoda. Like, he's one of my Yodas. He's like one of the guys that matter. Sifu Chen is a master of Shaolin 18 Lohan Pom. And very cool. I met him right when he moved to Canada. His daughter had married a Canadian guy. So he and Simu followed, right? And they move here, and Sifu's a doctor. So he sets up shop in Chinatown. And maybe 2-3 months after he moves here, my Kung Fu brother, who's constantly getting beat up at class, ends up going to the doctor because constantly beat up at class. And he meets Sifu Chen. And he gives me this call one day, and he's like, Neil, you got to come down here. I'm like, what? He's like, I went to the doctor. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hear whatever you're about to say. And he's like, no, I went to this Chinese doctor down in Chinatown, and he asked me what my bruises were for. Because he was there for his back, right? But he saw the bruises, and he's like, oh, well, I do Kung Fu. I was sparring with my brothers, blah, blah, blah. Well, now Sifu Chen is like, well, you should come to class this afternoon at 2:00 when I close the school, close my shop. So Daniel calls me, invites me down, and that's how I met Shifu, right? So he would teach classes twice a week to his patients. Nobody was there for martial arts or Qigong, not really. What it was that he would have people come in and say they had, I don't know, like rheumatoid arthritis. And he'd be like, oh, he'd give them their herbology, do their diagnostics, and then it would be like, yeah, you need to come to class for 6 weeks. Or you need to come to class for 8 weeks, or whatever it would be. So when I joined, it was really neat. I grabbed my journal and I went around and interviewed everybody. I'm like, what are you here for? Because, I mean, I'm this like Kung Fu guy, right? I'm there to learn fucking Kung Fu from the Shaolin dude, and I'm in this group of old people. You know, what are these old people doing here? So I find out that there's all of these different ailments that he's working on, and they're successfully being treated with this one set. And Shifu kind of takes me under his wing, right? Because I'm not a patient, and I'm asking all the other side of the questions, which I think probably kind of made him feel young, right? Because it's interesting, his story, he grew up in Guangzhou, Canton, and he trained at Po-Chi-Lam. He trained at Wang Feihong's school when he was a kid.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, for real, yeah, like Lam San Wing, right?
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, he trained there for like till he was 18, he said. So probably like 6-7 years or whatever. So he's Hung Gar, right?
Yeah.
And then when he became a doctor, right, because he was studying to become a doctor, his dad was a doctor. He had opened his clinic, and maybe a year or so after the clinic was opened, he said, there was this monk that he found. He was walking home, and he said there was a monk that was sitting, you know, on the street with some of his disciples, and the monk was really sick. So Shifu's a Buddhist. He's like, oh, dude, what's up? Let me take you back to the clinic. Like, it's just over there. I'll treat you. So he gets him some herbs, does some acupuncture, whatever it was. And he says, you know, keep coming to see me. I'll take care of you. A few days pass. Monk is okay. Whatever's going on is done. So the Shifu said that the monk took out a bag of money, and he's like, I have some traveling money, right? Like, let me pay you for your services. And he's like, no, this is good. This is good merit. Don't worry. You know, It's all cool. And the monk took it as a sign that this was like where he was supposed to be. So he decided that he was going to stay in Guangzhou and live at the temple there. And because of that, Shifu became a student. So he ended up training with the guy for 32 years, I think it was.
Wow. Until
the monk passed away, yeah. Which is really neat, because that monk actually wasn't even Chinese, Tibetan. And was traveling, he was traveling out of Tibet to go do Buddhist Dharma combat. You know, like when they'll go to other monasteries and they'll discuss Buddhism and debate things?
Yeah.
That's what he was up to, right?
Huh.
Wow. So it was just like happenstance, karma. So Shifu starts following him, and he gets this system, Shaolin 18 Lohan Pong, which goes through Tibet then, which is really weird.
Yeah.
So it's got this very interesting flavor to it that, like, you look at it and it's Chinese, but it's been in Tibet for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, it looks like tantric yoga mixed with kung fu, basically.
Wow.
It's really cool. Yeah. So I
Cool.
studied with Shifu Chen. Well, until he just passed. He just passed this year. So 20, what is it? 22, 20. Yeah. About 20 years. 20 years I was with him. Yeah. So yeah, that's him. And then, I mean, there's a few other cats I've met. In the big leagues, there'd also be Long Por. So in 2000, yeah, same year Master Ma died. The abbot of one of the largest Buddhist temples in the world in Thailand, Luang Por Viryang, decided that he had a vision when he was meditating that the way to make world peace in his mind was that if somebody meditates, they become calm. They chill out. They generally not, the guy who's going to go punch someone. So what if everybody meditated? Simple as that. If everybody was like that, there'd be a lot less shit in the world. Mm-hmm. So being the abbot of a temple and having a lot of money and resources, he started meditation courses, free ones. And he started building temples all over the planet, right? But being a total weirdo, this is so funny, he's Thai, right? When I trained with him, he was 80, 84, 85. But Thai guy, hated the heat. He didn't like being anywhere hot. So the first temple he built is in Canada. So
that's awesome.
It's not hot there. Yeah. So I was lucky, right? He liked living here in Edmonton where it's cold as Mars all of the time. Mm-hmm. So I started going to the temple when I heard about this meditation course, and it was amazing. There's this 80-year-old monk and his disciples, other monks that are there, because they came with him to help him out, and they were learning English, right? Mm-hmm. And they're helping run this course, and the course was... by the way, it's called the Willpower Institute is the name of his place. He's passed on now. He passed away a couple of years ago, but his students, like my generation, we're still teaching. And his students that are actually ordained are still teaching too. Willpower Institute, yeah. But anyway, so Luang Por's course was 6 months long, 5 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day. Yeah. So you would do an hour to an hour and a half of Dharma talk. He would lecture and teach. And then you would do an hour of meditation as well. And then there'd be a break and questions and whatever. Yeah, he wrote textbooks, had them translated into English, the whole thing. So 6 months, you had to meditate at least an hour a day. And at the end of the course, after the 6 months, you had to take your exams. So there was an oral exam and a written exam, which I was terrified of, to be perfectly honest. And you had to have, what was it? Oh yeah, and you had to have 100 hours of meditation homework. That's right. You had a homework sheet. It was a lot. Like, we had to have hundreds of hours of work. But it was amazing. Course was free. And if you passed the exams, there was a retreat in Thailand, which Luang Por paid for. Like, bought everybody's plane tickets, took everybody there, went to his temple, took everybody up onto Doi Tanantam, to Sacred Mountain, all kinds of stuff, right? All in his effort to try to just calm everybody down a little bit, which was really great. So I was really lucky. I discipled under him in 2000 and did the course. I did the golden course, which is the first one, I think. And then I did it again actually in 2004, just cause it's awesome. So, that's where I got all my Buddhist meditation training between him and Sifu Chen. And then, I guess the last origin story I could really say is happening now is, I got to this place where I was starting a workshop, and I'm going all over the planet trying to share the things I know, and I'm trying to find teachers everywhere I go, right? Like, we were talking before we started recording about Lo De Shou in Taiwan and how I've been there a bunch of times and I can't run into the guy. I just keep missing him. It's a hard thing to find good teachers. Well, I start training in another art called Xin Yi Liu He, which is the old form of Xin Yi, basically. 10 animal Xin Yi. And I hear from the guy teaching me, my brother Kevin, that his grand teacher, if you will, George Shu Guoming, like he's the real deal. he's killed people back in the Cultural Revolution. He fought guys and killed them. He was a Red Guard actually at one time, which was essentially government sanctioned street gangs because they didn't have enough to do.
Yeah,
like there was a lot of bad stuff that happened in the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, for sure.
So Master Shu, he's got a crazy story, but I hear about Master Shu in that he apparently has actually fought people like for real and killed guys. And I've been doing all this traveling, and I'm thinking to myself, if there's one thing I haven't experienced, it's somebody with that experience. And all of us would have had that experience at one time. Because like you go back in China, any one of us, 500 years, the guy we learned Kung Fu from, he'd killed people. You know what I mean? It wasn't a foregone conclusion like, oh man, he might be able to do it in the ring. It's like, no, Master's standing here because he can kill people. So I thought to myself, maybe there's something there in that touch that I don't get, right? And I was getting really frustrated I know this kind of sounds weird maybe, but it was getting very frustrating trying to find a teacher. Cause like everybody I would meet when I go to workshops and look around, they just weren't super skilled. It's not easier. Like the longer you train, the harder it is to find someone, right?
Sure.
So I decided I was going to meet this Shu Guoming, George Shu. And so I emailed him and no response. And I emailed him and no response. I emailed him about 10 times. And I'm like, okay, I am related to you. This is who you are to me. You're my great grand teacher. I'm related to you this way, and this way. Technically, you're like my uncle. Then I get a response. And all I get, honestly, is, what do you want to talk to me about? Here's my phone number. I'm like, fine. He's an old man, right? So, I called the guy and, I emailed him first. And I was like, well, I just want to come and take a private lesson. And, that would be really great. I've heard great things about your Kung Fu. Okay, well, what do you want to learn? I said, really, I just want to fight you. And he said, okay. And gave me a time. I shit you not. So I'm like, all right. So
how old was he and how old were you at the time? I think I remember this story from one of your interviews, but yeah. Weren't you like late 30s?
Yeah, late 30s is when I fought him. So he'd have been late 60s, probably. Yeah, he's probably 20 or 30 years older than me. Yeah, so I did it all in one day. I bought a plane ticket, round trip to San Francisco. And for the one day, right? Fly down there early in the morning, grab the taxi, went down to his neighborhood. And I'm waiting, find the address, and I'm waiting. There's a park across the street, and not a great neighborhood. Let me tell you that. And I see this, shuffling old Chinese man with his groceries coming back. Oh, can I help you, Master Shu, with your groceries? He's like, no. Okay. This is quite the neighborhood. He's like, yeah, it used to be nice. He says, it used to be a good neighborhood. Not anymore. He said, but it's okay. There's lots of criminals here. You don't have to be nice to them. Oh, yeah. So he's like, go warm up. I'm going to put my groceries away. Okay. So we go up the stairs, and he's got this like two floor place, and there's a garage in front, which you could go on the roof. So he points at the roof of the garage. He's like, go practice over there. So I start warming up. He comes out and is like, watches me for like 10 seconds. Okay. Like literally 10 seconds. And he's like, you practice too much. And I'm like, I have never heard a man say that in my entire life. Like, wow. What is wrong with you? Right? What do you mean you practice too much? Like, you practice too much. I'm like, what? He says, you do too many forms. I can tell. Okay. So what do you want to learn from me? He says, you want to learn a new form? What, do you think I'm stupid? You just told me I practice too much. No, I don't want to learn any forms. I said, I wanted to fight you on the phone, remember? And he just shrugged his shoulders and stood up. And I'm like, I am no pushover, dude. I'm over 200 pounds. And
you're a tall
30s,
guy, too.
30 years into my martial arts, you know what I mean? Yeah, and I'm like basically 6 feet tall. It's 5'11" and a half. And yeah, this little old man stands up. He's like, yeah, okay. And that's when my confidence went, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
There's no fear at all coming off of this guy. Like at all. Not cool. So yeah, I put my hands up. He put his hands up. And the fight was one exchange. That's it. I came at him and he hit me so hard that it broke some of my teeth and knocked me on my side and my head hit the ground. Like, he hit me fucking hard, really hard. More power than I'd ever felt in my life.
Damn.
And I got back up, kind of shook my head, and I was like, wow, how'd you do that? Let's do it again. So he's like, oh, you're crazy, man. So I'm like, hey, can you do this style on me? Like, and then we just started training, and it was great. And he really took to me. He just started kind of like dumping the whole download on me. And it was really great. We've been in touch ever since. I actually brought him up to Canada to teach at my school and stuff at the deep water convention I used to have. So I've been following him for quite a few years now. Interestingly, his attitude, not only were his hands different. I mean, like, we can talk about that if you want, but when I asked him near the end of our session, I was like, do you take disciples? Lineage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, disciples? Confucian baloney. You want to be my disciple? Fine, go ahead. I'll sign it. I don't care. I was like, yeah, man, I can deal with you. You're cool.
Right?
He's a rough character, but he knows what's up. He really knows what's up. But he got a lot of lucky breaks in his martial arts life, too. He's traveled and trained with everybody. Mm. Yeah. Because he actually had a government grant at one time. After the Cultural Revolution, the government decided that they needed to, like, at least document Kung Fu stuff.
Yeah.
And he was a card-carrying communist, Red Guard. He got the job. So they gave him an unlimited ticket to go fly around China, meet masters, and film them.
Yeah, I think it was that called the Mac Survey? Or something like that. Yeah.
If you've ever seen China's Living Masters, those are all George. He's the guy filming. Yeah. He's behind the camera. So that's what's crazy about him, right? Is then he trained with all of those guys. Like, all of those guys. Lu Zijian and Ma Yuliang, and, like, he knew all of them.
Wow.
So it's really crazy talking to him, yeah. But that's why he has such a odd touch.
Tell us about the touch.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You're bringing it up. Tell us about the touch.
How do you describe that? I mean, I don't want to use a cliche like
it's okay.
Iron wrapped in cotton or whatever. He's not really that. That's more like Sifu Chen was. Sifu Chen was more like a wrought iron bar with a little bit of leather wrapped around it when you hit him. George is like getting hit with a wave in an ocean. Like, it doesn't, for instance, how like the Yizhuang guys, the Gao guys, that's one of the things I notice when I touch the Gao style Bagua people is they feel like knives. Mm-hmm. They feel like they're going to cut through you, which is very annoying. I assume it's from all the Xin Yi. Mm-hmm. George is more like a building I'm pretty sure is falling on me. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, it's just going to break me. Mm-hmm. Like, he tore my rotator cuff with my block. Wow. He went right through my...
Uh-oh, we lost you, Neil. How about... Hold on. We lost you, Neil.
Yeah.
Let's see here. There you are. Hold on. We're losing you, brother. I'm going to reach out to him.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I see you.
Yeah, there you go. You're back. And we're back. So he tore your rotator cuff and while you were blocking him. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's because of the type of force he specializes in. There's like different ways of seeing things, right? So like this is getting into like he has real internal power in a way that I've never understood it before. Like he's the guy who's taken me to the next level for sure. Cause what he hit me with, like, cause I asked him, right? And he called it tangential force. So he calls it either tsunami power or tornado power. And that's just direction. Tsunamis come over the top vertically. And tornadoes are horizontal swirls, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if I describe it, you can try it, but it's not easy.
Right.
If you're imagining throwing just like a hook punch, you're just throwing a hook punch, okay? That's all he threw at me too, which is even more annoying. But the hook punch, when we think about it, an external martial artist throws their arm. Their shoulder moves, everything flexes, bang. An internal martial artist means that they're going to try to put their body behind it. So you start to get this whole like chain of muscular contraction that takes place from the lower body through the torso and out. So you get this massive acceleration through the body, right? That's why we tend to hit harder than we look like we should. But that's still what George would consider in the body kung fu. But the difference is that it's what the mind is doing during that. So when you're an internal martial artist, right, you train a long time to get that chain of command working. But once the chain of command's working, then what? That's where his stuff starts, right? So for instance, you could talk about intention. I mean, I could throw a hook punch with no intent to do anything and it's going to do nothing, right? Or I can throw a hook punch and I could be trying to kill my opponent. That would be a very different thing. So we all know that changes the sensation between the two of us. The relationship changes, right? So what the space power type stuff is, I shouldn't have called it that. Oh well. The technical name of his style is, what is it? Ling Kong Shen Sherman. Ling Kong Shen Sherman. And he even used the words Ling Kong, like empty force. Mm-hmm. The gateway to learn empty force is the name of his style. So the thought process is your mind reaches your opponent before your hand. So if you're throwing a hook punch, you basically visualize that you've already thrown it in your mind, and you imagine your imaginary hand is ahead of your real one. And the imaginary hand hits him first. And then the other one crashes in behind it. Now, if you can take that, if that makes sense, then you take the two of them and you run them on different tangents. So my arm's moving on a horizontal, but my intention's moving in a vertical. Bad things happen then. Because you know how when we block each other, somebody throws a swing at our head, that nice big horizontal swing, if you intersect it, you know that the power is going a certain way. So your body intersects it, usually at about 90 degrees, right? If you're trying to stop it. But if the person's power isn't going the same direction as their limb, your body sets up in the wrong place. That's how my rotator was torn. My arm was in the right place to hit his arm, but my power was going in the wrong direction. His power was wrapping forward towards him again, and my power was wrapping out against what I thought was a hook. So I actually had no force whatsoever in the right direction, right? So I just took the full brunt of everything.
That really changes the dynamic of tactic to me. Like you're saying, it's next level stuff. It's fascinating because, you know, you've got the integrated body and then you're integrating the mind, but it's almost like you talk about, the lower dantian and the upper dantian in Bagua and want to kind of separating them, right? It's almost like you're doing that with the mind and body, but they meet somewhere. I don't know.
Absolutely. I don't know. Well, I mean, if you like the way I see martial arts is that we're all doing one art. There is only actually one art, I think, right? The art that we all study is a way to try to achieve enlightenment. That's all. We're trying to figure out who we are, what we're doing here, what makes us happy, all that. Mm-hmm. And some people do it through painting and some people through music. And we pursue enlightenment through bare-fisted murder. That is what we do.
Yes.
So while we're doing that, you know, and I love that about us because it's very hard for us to lie to ourselves. I mean, my favorite example of that is, you know, I've had a lot of kind of white light bunnies come to my club and they'll say things to me like, you know, I've been here for 3 months and now I'm amazed at how much I've progressed. Oh, that's cool. I'm not even afraid of death anymore. Really? How about we check? We can check.
Right?
There's no bullshitting when somebody can check, right? There's a truth to our method that doesn't exist in many others. There's a check and balance of getting a fist in the face. You can talk as much shit in martial arts as you want, but you got to be able to put up. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're saying that, you know, from my point of view, we're all trying to become enlightened. We're trying to become happy. So that's our art. That means all of the different styles of martial arts, they're just ways of climbing that mountain. And we're all just doing our best to climb the mountain. And there's lots of different parts to it. I mean, at the beginning, we all are all around the base of the mountain and so far away, we think we're different. Some of us even think some of us are better than the others. My path's way better than yours. Uh-huh. See you at the top. Like, we're all going there anyway, man. Calm down.
Right.
It's just, but that tribalism is a way of the world, but that's one of those things. In a martial arts club, we also experience that tribalism. We all think we're doing the one that's the best, especially at the beginning. So that's why we do it, right? Our art's the best and our teacher's the best, et cetera, et cetera. And then once we stop doing our teacher's martial art, we start to do our own, then the path changes, right? Because then it is about perspective. So like we're talking about the different dantians and moving them and bringing them apart and all this kind of stuff. I see the main path begins with understanding what dualism is and then trying to work on dualism, because duality is how the world exists, yin yang, right? And enlightenment is essentially non-duality. If you were to explain it in scientific terms, it's getting past that, getting past the me and you and oppositions and all that. Then everybody's happy, right? Then we can all be chill. So I see martial arts as we grow up in a world where our minds and bodies are considered separate. And it's generally because of Western medicine. Because Western doctors started by dissecting corpses. So if you're looking at a dead thing and you're trying to see how the machinery in the dead thing works, you're going to learn something. But because the Chinese worship their ancestors, they couldn't cut open Uncle Bob when Uncle Bob died, because that would make Uncle Bob angry.
Right.
And you would be cursed, right? So they had to study the body alive. That means their medical system has to look completely different. And they never saw the body without the mind. So the mind and body were always one thing rather than two things. So martial arts training, I see it as we really think somehow that we're like piloting a meat suit. And we're not. We are as much a part of our bodies as anything else. If you cut off your little finger, you notice it and you'll have phantom pains. You'll even pretend that it's still there in your mind. I mean, if you were just piloting a meat suit, why would you care? It's just a finger. Got 9 more. Who cares? But it's not how it works. Part of you was affected. So I think that the first stage of martial arts is bringing mind and body together, because people don't think they're together. They generally live a short distance from their bodies today. They're on the internet. They're in the future. They're thinking about the past, their bills.
They're
right?
on the phone, having a
conversation.
conversation.
On the phone doing this instead of doing something important. Exactly. So you do martial arts practice, it brings your mind and body together heavily, and I think that's where the quote external internal debate happens, which I think is nonsense. All that is just in levels of practice. Beginners don't move as well as advanced people. That's all. Big deal. Stop fighting about it. So as the mind and body become one thing, you get what quote unquote internal power is, because now when your mind moves, your whole body reacts. And then the third stage to me of martial arts, right? So now you've gone from mind-body duality into mind and body as one single thing. And then the stuff that George has been showing me is separating that again. So now I know my body's been well trained. It can just do its thing. I can let it run on autopilot, right? I mean, I can basically figure out my shopping list and do my palm changes. I've done it so many times, right?
Yep.
So if that's the case, what should my mind be doing? What should I be thinking about? And that's where George was saying you practice too much. You have looked into your body so much you forgot your mind. Now it's time to just go, look, nobody's going to ever do this shit perfect anyway. You're doing it good enough. But if you think this way, that will take you somewhere else, right? And that's when the mind and the body become separate again. The body runs on autopilot. And the mind then is contemplating other things. Like this could even be strategy and tactics. I mean, people that are just fighting and they're animalistic and they're instinctual, that's one thing. Somebody whose body is well trained enough, like Lo, he's not just beating you up. He's taking you apart for the pleasure of the class, for the lesson, because he doesn't need to kill you for the class to need the lesson. He's just going to show them the lesson and you. That's what high level is like, right? His mind is in a different place. And that's exactly what it is, right? Once you're able to bring your mind to different places while you move, well, then what do you want to play with? See if something works, right? Georgia's stuff seems to work, so that's cool. But I bet you there's tons of other things that work too. And tons of things that don't. But you got to figure that out for ourselves, right?
Right. Kind of what's going to work for you and your vehicle. And
exactly. And I think that's one of the issues we tend to have as martial artists too, is there's a time when you're not supposed to do your teacher's kung fu anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But people have a hard time getting there, getting the confidence to be like, when is it time to do that? Well, you should know the whole damn system, first of all.
Sure.
You better know the whole foundations. But then, eventually you got to get to the point where it's your expression of, and that's your mind breaking free, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very much so. That's very well said.